heard it said from among the popular and the famous, quote, "We are all God's children," unquote, as the famous and the celebrities try to justify their lifestyles. Is that true? Hi, this is Barry Phillips of 10-Minute Torah, day number 5 of the era. And we are in Genesis Bereshit, chapter number 21. And as usual, let's start with verse 1, which says, "And Yahweh visited Sarah as he had said, and Yahweh did for Sarah as he had spoken. So Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the appointed time of which Elohim had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Yitzhak. And Abraham circumcised his son Yitzhak when he was 8 days old, as Elohim commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Yitzhak was born to him." There's quite a bit of information that's going on and continues to take place in this particular section of this Torah portion. It says in verse 1 that Yahweh visited Sarah. The word here is pakad, to attend to muster, to appoint, to look after, to care for. So it denotes the idea of being very compassionate and caregiving, very tender-hearted, perhaps gentle, and Yah visits her in such a way as that she conceives. What's interesting is back in chapter 18, when we first hear Yah say this to her in her hearing. Chapter 17, Yah told Abraham this is going to happen. Evidently, he didn't mention that to Sarah, because when Yah says that she's going to bear a son, she laughs. And she is saying Yah says, "They'll certainly return to you according to the time of life." That's chapter 18 and verse 10. Verse 11 says, "Sarah was past the way of women." In other words, she'd gone into menopause. And probably at her age for some time. But there was a reversal that took place in her body. Now, if we go over to Romans chapter number 4, we find a little bit of an explanation about how this actually came to be. And it says in chapter number 4 of Romans, verse 19, "And having not grown weak in belief, he, Abraham, did not consider his own body already being dead, about 100 years old, and the deadness of Sarah's womb. And he did not hesitate about the promise of Elohim through unbelief, but was strengthened in belief, giving esteem to Elohim, being completely persuaded that what he had promised he was also able to do." So the walk of faith and belief concerning this promise, it would require that their bodies realign themselves to the capacity and the power of the promise. There's something to chew on right there. Now, I'm not going to tell you that if you have enough faith that Yah is going to reverse your aging process. Now, remember, right prior to this, in chapter 20, Abimelech, a king in Gerar, sees Sarah in her 90s, postmenopausal Sarah, and wants her so badly as to make her a bride. She retained her beauty, amazingly so. Or was she rejuvenated back to a younger appearing, more beautiful lady? Not to say that those of you ladies that are a little older are not beautiful. You are. I don't want to try to dig a hole for myself here I can't get out of. Okay, so we find then that Yah visits her, and he is enabling her to go back into the cycles of life and to conceive. So It says then that she gave birth at the appointed time. Now, in chapter 18, Yah says about this time next year. Is that the appointed time, or are we being given a hint that Yitzhak was born on a particular time of the Moedim, one of the feast days, Pesach, for example? That's a possibility as well. The Midrash makes an interesting comment in that in chapter 20, Yah had struck the house of Abimelech for taking Sarah, and all of the wombs were closed up. We find that out in the last verse, where Yahweh had closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. All of the wombs had been closed up. So when Yah prayed for Abimelech and his household, Sarah was then opened in her womb. So the Midrash says then, when Abraham prayed that the wombs of Abimelech's household be opened, Sarah's womb was opened as well, which is then a principle that I learned from my dad. My dad was praying for someone else to receive the baptism, the infilling of the Holy Spirit, many, many years ago, back in the late 40s, early 50s. And then he himself, while he was praying for someone else. And when he shared that story with me, Yah was speaking to me about, if you want prayer answered for yourself or for someone you're praying for, pray for someone else of like situation. It broadens the power of prayer somehow. I don't know all of the power and import of that. So she's bringing forth then this son. We need to understand that there are many conceptions, spiritually speaking, many conceived things that we need to receive, and we need to pray fervently for them, that we can conceive in the Spirit the goals, the agenda, the anointings, the purposes of Yah, the discernments of Yah, so then that we can bring forth sons and daughters, fruit of our spiritual womb, bring it to a reality. The Midrash says that many infertile women were remembered that day when Sarah gave birth. Many sick people were cured that day. Many prayers were answered along with theirs, and there was much cheerfulness in the world. Interesting concept. Now, let's also notice this. Sarah bore Abraham his heir, not Hagar. And it was perhaps rumored that Sarah had gotten pregnant while in the household of Abimelech, and Abimelech was actually Yitzhak's father. But the text here says that in plain speech that it was Abraham's son, and that Abraham's son was conceived and born to him by Sarah, not Hagar. So we understand then from what we were referencing earlier, aren't we all God's children? Well, the answer is no. No. Yah says to Abraham, when Sarah's pointing out, Ishmael is mocking, making fun, deriding in a very derogatory manner. He is, some scholars say, even acting lewdly against Yitzhak. Get him and that woman out of here. And Abraham is still very much emotionally attached to Ishmael. Yah says, you need to listen to the voice of your wife. It's time for her to go. And so Hagar and Ishmael were sent away so that there would be no competition for the claim of Abraham's continuing lineage through Yitzhak. Not everybody is God's children, especially if they choose not to be. That's an important disclaimer there. Shabbat shalom to all of you. May the presence of the King abide with you. May you be filled with his presence and his joy. May insights greatly leap from the page and fill your spirit. cause you to be amazed and wonder at the power of His Word. Until next week, Shabbat Shalom.